Good morning. I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the members of the panel today. To my far left is Ms. Linda McFadgen. To my immediate left is Ms. Carrie Linklater. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing today. Representing the Assessment Taxation Department is Mr. Jeremy Pohl, and the Secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Ellen Rowe. We'll be hearing applications for the revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which a revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to the assessed value of a classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. If you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they still wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you have a cell phone, I'll ask you to put that on silent, please, and I'll have you swear the parties in. Thank you. Yeah, the first one is going to be 281 dollars.
Please state your full name.
Jeremy Randall.
And you swear the words you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Get there.
And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Pardon me? No. That's what you think. Got it.
First property we're going to deal with is 281 Donald. Good morning, Mr. Newman. Good morning. You're here representing the owners, and it's the amount of the assessed value we're dealing with?
That's correct.
Thank you. So, Mr. Assessor, when you're ready, we'll hear from you, please.
File number is 19-16-22. Roll number is 120977901000. Specific address is 281 Donald. The property is otherwise known as the Met Center, Metropolitan Center. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $9,730,000. My recommendation is that to be maintained today. Just so some backing for this appeal, there are several outstanding municipal board appeals for this property. So there's a little bit more meat to the brief that I've prepared in light of all those appeals that are being waiting to be heard. So the property was originally built in 1920. It was renovated in 2012 and reopened as the Metropolitan Center. The effective year we have built is 1990. The gross floor area we have is 54,637 square feet. Leasable area is approximately 40,654 square feet. There is no exterior parking. If you go to my page 8, photograph of the property. Here, a photo of the property, city corner to Portage and Donald, right across from the NPS Center. Page 9 is just a little bit larger aerial view of the property. improvements to the MTS Center. Again, on page 10 shows the exterior photos of the property, on page 11 as well. And then we'll get to some interior photographs of the property after it's been renovated in its current state. Page 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There are quite a lot of photos here. I apologize if they're in black and white. Frankly, wasn't looking for color. It gives a good bit visual representation of what's actually the property is being restored to. On page 20 is the rooftop terrace, separate patio, lounge area. Okay. On page 22, and moving forward, is the MTS, the Winnipeg Jets street party. This was taken through their run to the semifinals. As you can see, there's front stage right adjacent to the MTS Center. Lots of activity around it, lots of foot traffic. 26, photo launch area on top of the roof. One of the cantilever parts of the roof coming out. Page 27 are the permits that are associated with the renovation of the property. It was declared approximate $15 million of permit work for the property to restore it. From its former boarded up state. On the following pages are those permits. On page 31 is the pre-renovation history of the property. This is a photo made 2009. As you can see, it was boarded up, and it was boarded up for 25 plus years. At that point, Canadians bought it. The restoration work started in 2011, 2012. And then on page 33, this is starting of the completed restoration, the addition put onto the property. So as you can see, it was quite a venture. Considerable amount of work brought it in to become a state-of-the-art sports entertainment and hospitality venue right adjacent to the MTS Center. So on page 39 is the architectural firm number 10. They're the ones who spearheaded the renovation. I'll just read a little bit here on page 41. This is coming off of their website. Highlighted in the bottom of the first paragraph. In 2007, Canadians purchased the site and appointed number 10 architectural group to reconstruct and renovate the building. It opened in 2012 as a long-awaited metropolitan entertainment center, a state-of-the-art conference, banquet, and meeting facility. State-of-the-art. Look at the bottom of the page. To meet the modern standards, a new annex structure was also added to the original two-story building. The addition addresses today's requirements for barrier-free access, washrooms, kitchen storage, elevator, and emergency egress without unduly spoiling the inherent character of the existing theater. The dated electrical and mechanical infrastructure was also completely replaced with an entirely new modern system. Original slope floors and road seating were reconstructed into a series of stepped flat terraces suitable for state-of-the-art food and entertainment emporium. Theatrical and special effect lights were also added to round out the modern entertainment experience. So not only did they renovate the historic nature of the building, they put a building on the side to meet all the updated coding, and it basically state-of-the-art turnkey. On the following page is Center Ventures plans for the area. Obviously, the Metropolitan Center on page 43 is referenced as part of the shed district. As we go through, the sheds, it's on the edge of the shed district, I should say, or in the shed district. If you look at page 46, the star on Donald, it's a little small, but it's right adjacent to the MTS Center. So, as we go through, it meets the shed district's image for sports entertainment and hospitality. It's one of the focal points for downtown's design for this area. If you look at at page number 53, you can see how the shed district is being pushed and developed. This is the Somerset building. As you can see, Center Ventures plans is for development on the first floor. This was done prior to the purchase of the property, which is on the next page, on page 54. Canadians bought the Somerset building. Bought the Somerset building in 2018. They paid approximately $11,432,000 for the property. I checked to see if there was any redevelopment for the main floor. I have yet to see any permits for the property, but obviously the Center Venture basically showing from their projection of what they want for the in around the MTS Center that there's some economic development for the Somerset building. Page 55 is a bit of a write-up on the history of the Metropolitan Theater. But really what it comes down to is after all this is said and done, what is its value? I can get into the history of the appeals, I can do that in a little bit, but I'd rather stick with the valuation portion first. So what would it be valued as? I did a pretty took a long look at this over the summer and leading up to the summer, expecting to get it to municipal boards on this, but we never did. How would this property actually rent? If it wasn't owner occupied, it is owner occupied by Canadians. How would it rent? This is a sports, entertainment, and hospitality area. This property deals with exactly that: sports, entertainment, hospitality. So on the first two floors, I'm looking at it as a restaurant lounge. On the remaining area is a live events where it can be handled anything from sporting, kickboxing, amateur boxing, to events more associated with business luncheons, presentations, live shows. It encompasses quite a lot of aspects that can be housed in this property. So when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at shed comparable rents, I'm looking at downtown restaurant rents, outside the downtown restaurant rents, and then theater rents for the live space here. So I'll go through my comparables on page 3. These comparables will be associated with the years under appeal. Obviously, we're going back since the opening of the property in 2013. I'm looking at shed district rents. When we look at the total area, we have approximately 57,000 square feet that's leased up. The median CRU is 6,000 square feet. And when we go through, the median rents are $70.58 for the 2010 reference year. For the 2012 reference year, it's increasing to $22 a square foot. In the 2014 reference year, it's stable at stable at $22 a square foot. In April 1st of 2016, it is $23.28 a square foot, and in April 1st of 2018, our reference year, it is $24 a square foot. So you see a trajectory of rents that are increasing. We have the property at $19.12 a square foot. So this is for the shed dip area. It's immediately adjacent to the MTS Center, which is a large economic driver for this type of sports, entertainment, and hospitality commercial venture. But what I also did was look outside of the downtown area, and then the downtown area and outside the downtown area, anywhere that there was an economic driver for restaurant rent. So as you can see, outside of the shed district for downtown, for the same reference years, for April 1st, 2010 up until the reference date of this year, April 1st, 2014 or 2018. So if we follow through, this is the second block of rents. We have a median rent of $20.47 a square foot in April 1st, 2010, $23.15 a square foot, April 1st, 2012. We have $25 a square foot, April 1st, 2014. $25 a square foot, April 1st, 2016, and at a reference date, a bit of a drop at $23.88 a square foot. So again, pretty stable and around the $24, $25 mark. So outside of the downtown, we're also looking at anywhere there's a power center, anywhere there's a large economic driver. We're looking at the same reference years. So if we look at the median rent, the study indicates that it's $25, and for April 1st, 2010, it's $25.09 a square foot. April 1st, 2012, it's $27.62 a square foot. April 1st, 2014, it's $29 a square foot. April 1st, 2016, it's $29.40 a square foot. And again, the same rate in April 1st, 2018, our reference year. So then the next take on it is for theaters. There's a limited amount of theaters that aren't owner occupied, but I brought in the comparables that we could find. Cineplex Odeon on the Guilford, Famous Players in St. Vital's Shopping Center, and Famous Players in St. James. So their average rental rates are $25.15 and $26.25 for April 1st, 2010, leading up to, and you can read it for yourself, April 1st, 2018, which is $26.86 a square foot and $20.27 a square foot. So if you look at a large theater area, similar, you get those rates in those areas. So if you look at page 4, for the actual workup that we have 40,000 square feet, leased at $19.12, below what our comparables are, which produces a potential rent of $777,304. Our standard parameters apply after that. Vacancy at 3%, which produces effective gross income of $753,985. Expenses at 2%, shortfall at $7.50, which produces a net operating income of $729,758. Capped at 7.5 gives us our $9,730,000 rounded. So that's our valuation summary. Just a bit of backing so I get back to the municipal boards that are currently weighted and heard. So on page 66 is just a summary. Wow. So pretty much every year has been appealed. I believe there was one business assessment year that was missed, but every assessment's been appealed by the appellant. On page 67 is the last year's or the last cycle's Board Revision ruling for the 2018 cycle. At this point, it was mistakenly put on under cost and had a value of $6,114,000. At appeal, I changed it to income. That income increased the value to $8,046,000. That value was increased by this board, and it is under appeal at the municipal board. So the last value that this panel set collectively was $8,046,000. Then on the following pages are just the orders that were at the Board of Revision for the various years. So we get to page 75. Here's the current tenant, which is owner occupied, and it is. And it basically shows what the property is, the historical designation of the property, what the property is suited for, and I'll get into that as we go along. This is straight from their website. As you go through the pages, there's the Allen Theater on the second floor. You have the lounge on the main floor. So 2 restaurant areas. Then on page 82, you have the rooftop patio, terrace. On page 83 indicates private events, sporting. As you can see, they have the NHL showing in the background. So you can watch live events there as well. Page 84, conferences, business conferences. Page 85, corporate reception. Page 86, weddings. Bachelorette parties, bachelor parties, social fundraisers. Page 87, wedding showers. Farewell brunches, retirements. So there's a number of aspects that this venue can hold and that can go through on a day-to-day or weekly basis. On page 88 is just some of the advertisements that the Met has. And I'll go through them fairly quickly because they are a long list. They show movies, older movies, viewing parties. They show awards, ceremonies. The Dental Association's annual convention. They have live shows, as you can see on page 94, live performances. Amateur boxing, as I already commented on earlier, page 95. And leading forward. 88, again, more live events. So as you flip through the pages, it's just a good representation of how busy this venue can be. So, we get into every single one, just flip through. It's quite a long list, as I indicated. Lastly, on page 123 is the I&E. It's filled out correctly. Owner occupied, they're reporting their costs. So there's no rent to get here. As indicated, they're owner occupied. So at the end of this, when I look at this, this is a very busy sports entertainment and hospitality venue right adjacent to the MTS Center, the largest economic driver for this type of thing in the city. Around this property, you see Canadians Tavern United on the opposite side. You see Shark Club, which is in the old City Place space, which is an older space that was renovated. You see Met Center, which is currently on the opposite side of that. And then you see the Somerset building being called by Canadians. And then on the opposite side of that, north of Portage, is Brown Social House. Everywhere you see around the perimeter of the MTS Center, you see a sports entertainment and hospitality type venue trying to capture some of the economic spin-off that comes off the MTS Center. And you can see the rents that are associated with those spaces, with those CRUs. So when we do the actual review back on page 3, the Shed District, we have an average weighted rent of $24. An average weighted rent of $24.57 with a median rent of $24. That's a very tight range for about 57,000 square feet of space, just immediately adjacent to where we're talking about. And everywhere else that you see median for an economic driver, similar to this, you see rents that are north of $24. So at the reference period. So when we put a $19 rent into the property, I think it's fair, I think it's achievable. And our parameters that we put on the property, after a $20 million renovation that turned this property into a state-of-the-art venue, I think it's reasonable. With that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, questions for the assessor?
Yes. Page 3 of your brief, So is it fair to summarize your approach as being to look for restaurants, bars, in a variety of areas, the Shed, greater downtown, outside downtown, extract the rents from those and summarize them on this table?
Correct.
And what you've done is you've gone back to each of the prior reference dates for the prior cycles to show what the flow of, what's happened with rents over those number of cycles.
Correct.
Okay. And ultimately, you've concluded for this cycle, $19.12 a square foot for the 40,000 plus square feet of this building.
The model per is $19.12 a square foot. If it were me, I would be pushing a little bit higher rent, but I elected to keep the model rent.
And how much would you push it higher if it were you?
I would be putting in it at around $24 a square foot is what the Shed District would be.
Okay. And so at $24 a square foot, it would pay about $1 million a year in rent.
That's what the market is indicating, yes.
And that's what you would put it at if you had done it as opposed to the model.
I would be asking, yes, yes.
Okay. Mr. Pohl, you've been an assessor for how long?
2008, I think.
Okay. And as part of your training, you take courses with respect to appraisal methodology?
Correct.
And do part of those courses also teach you about the concept of highest and best use?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And the concept of highest and best use, among other things, requires that the use be financially feasible.
Correct.
And if the use is not financially feasible, then it's not an appropriate use for the property, correct?
Yes.
This property has a historic designation,
Correct.
and the nature of the historic designation prevents the interior auditorium from being altered in any significant way, correct?
Correct.
Also prevents what's called the Allen Restaurant on the second floor from being altered in any way, and prevents the main floor and the exterior facade as well.
Correct. That's why they put the annex building. Right.
So, many types of real estate, if a certain use doesn't work, they can be converted to another use, correct?
Correct.
Retail can become office, office can become retail, that type of thing.
Correct.
Of your comparables on page 3, with one exception, not one of them, leave aside the theaters for a moment, but all of the restaurants, bars, etc., with one exception, two exceptions, I guess, and none of them are over 10,000 square feet, correct?
Yes, the size of any of the metropolitan center is unique into itself. There isn't any else in stock in our inventory that would have this type of size.
And have you or has the department done an analysis to determine whether the use of the property is financially feasible?
As far as if you're asking me, have we did an analysis on whether the business venture within the property would generate a certain level of rent? We have not done that. That's not how we attribute real estate value.
That's not how you attribute real
We
estate
don't
value.
look at what, well, I mean, for this type of property, for hotels you would, but for this type of property, no.
Okay, but let me phrase it somewhat differently. You acknowledged earlier that highest and best use is part of the training you obtain, and one of the requirements of highest and best use is that the use of the property must be financially feasible.
Correct.
If a business cannot successfully operate at a location, there will be no rent to be paid, will there?
In theory, yes. Well, just to follow up with that, I don't really know where you're going with this, but we don't really need to explore that element because we see that Shark Club's there, we see Tavern United's across the street, which is Canada Inn's. They're not dark. Shark Club's not dark. Brown Social House is not dark. The Pint, although it was in my list of comparables, that was more of a real estate transaction that caused them to shut down, but reopened with the local eatery and pub in there as soon as it could be facilitated. So everywhere that you see in and around there, you see sports and entertainment and hospitality ventures working. We don't have any dark spaces in there. So, right,
So
it is at
therefore,
the end.
from your perspective, that conclusion that flows from that is that a highest and best use analysis as to financial feasibility is not required.
No, what I'm saying is you can see it on every yearly annual return from the INEs. It is working adjacent to the MTS Center. This is just one property around the MTS Center. So,
Okay.
not like we see a whole bunch of vacancies around the MTS Center and everyone's
Sure.
going out of business for the tenant that's occupying these spaces.
Sure, and I don't want to belabor this, but obviously, every single one of the surrounding premises that you speak about is much smaller in size. And the largest one is the Shark Club at 17,500 square feet. That holds a casino essentially, doesn't it?
I believe about 40% of the floor space is gambling, yes.
Yes, okay.
The other so 60% is restaurant oriented.
And as part of the submission of the brief, you were given a set of financial statements for the operation of the business, correct?
Correct.
So you've had the opportunity of reviewing those?
Yes, I have.
And you noted that in 2018, this property was initially valued on a cost approach?
Correct.
That's what the model did.
Correct.
And you looked at it, decided income was more appropriate.
Correct.
Do you know why the model valued it on a cost approach?
Most likely it was done on a default. I'm not exactly sure why it was on cost approach. It most likely because of the renovation and the subs that came out afterwards. Maybe something wasn't flagged right where it should have been income.
So this is an old cinema that was redeveloped, the Walker Theater, or the Odeon as it was called way back when, the Burton Cummings today. That was an old theater.
I like the Walker.
Okay. That's done on a cost approach, isn't it?
Correct.
Pantage's Playhouse,
Correct.
done on a cost approach, isn't it?
Correct.
Are those the two most similar facilities in the city to the
If you're looking at it
metropolitan?
in terms of when they were built, yes, but if you're looking at the renovation that occurred to the subject property, absolutely not. This is state-of-the-art turnkey. Those properties are not that and such.
Okay. But in terms of physical configuration and layout, they are the two most similar, agreed?
Physical, initial use, yeah.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
So this entire income approach is model-driven, then once you determined that it was a restaurant,
Correct.
that's the model-driven rent,
Yes.
and that's the model-driven cap rate,
Correct.
and with no adjustments.
I haven't done any adjustments to this property, no.
Although this space is significantly bigger than anything else.
But it also gives you significantly more economic opportunity. It gives you a wide event space. It gives you adjacent to the MTS Center. It gives you all that economic spin-off that you can get for, as you see through their own advertising. There is numerous events that can occur in this during regular business hours, after business hours, weekend hours. It's a very, very.
Flexible is what you're saying.
Exactly. So it's not just a restaurant, there's a number of other things that can go on in this property.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Ms. Linkletter?
Yes, Mr. Pohl, you would agree that this is a unique building?
Absolutely.
And it was built in 1920? Okay. And it has an effective age of 2012, correct? After the renovation?
1990.
Oh, sorry,
The
1990.
renovation occurred in the process.
That's right, sorry. Just-
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I see on my notes, it's 1990. So it's effectively almost 30 years old for the effective age.
That's what, yes.
Okay. But essentially, in many ways, this building is still 1920, correct?
No, they went through this property as indicated in the permits. Turn to page 41. Or start at 39. The number 10 architectural firm website actually features this. They went through this property with a fine tooth comb. It's not just a we're gonna renovate it, bring it back up to code kind of thing. They renovated it to a replica state. If you look inside the theater, it is immaculate. I'm hoping there's no argument on that. I walked through this property with Ellen. I've been to this property, it's off hours, not at work related.
Okay.
It is gorgeous. And not only did they renovate it back to its original grandeur, they have an annex building off to the side, which has the more modern amenities to allow, they went through the building systems, they upgraded everything. If you're looking at a property and you're seeing a 1920 level property, it's just not the case. There's a little bit of, as pointed out by Mr. Neufeld and I can't remember her name when we walked through, there was an event manager. A few of the terrace areas, if you sit on them, there's a bit of an obstruction on a few, but most of them are very good sightlines. So there may be a small amount of functional obsolescence in the actual terrace where they step them down. But that's on the, in fact, very, very minor. So aside from that, it's a turnkey state-of-the-art building.
What about the actual foundation of the building?
I saw no structural engineer report that indicated there's any issues. When you go through renovation as such, if there were to be, I'm sure they would have noted it.
Okay. But the actual foundation of the building is still 1920, correct?
Yeah, but getting to the actual structure, some of these structures, like the structure like this would be, there wouldn't be any issues. We're not talking like an addition for a house or something like that. Like these structures are put down to most likely a level of soil strata where it simply is basically look as a 500-year element. Like there would be no real issues here with any structural elements that I've seen.
Okay.
Unless I see an engineer's report that indicates something different. I can't imagine that a firm such as number 10 would go through it and miss something like that, is what I'm saying. So,
Okay. But what my question is, it is still a 1920 foundation on the entire structure?
yeah, they didn't do
Okay.
any foundation
Right.
work or any major structural elements.
Okay.
I know they repaired the roof, well, they did everything else, but as far as the foundation's concerned, I don't think there was anything else.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, you inspected the property with Mr. Newman, not Mr. Neufeld?
No, did I say that?
With
Did I
Mr.
say that? Sorry, I
I've
apologize.
been called worse, it's okay.
I don't know why.
But that's who you inspected with, was the...
I give an apology, yes. We inspected the entire property except for the storage areas in the basement. I don't believe we went down there. Right.
Just a clarification, basement area is not being included in the 40,000 square feet then.
Okay, so, your 1990 age variant, was that an observed age variant or was it calculated, you know?
It was calculated.
Calculated based on new work versus old work?
Yes. I didn't do any adjustment to that. That was simply based on firm work that came in.
Okay, and the 1990 effective age, does that affect the cap rate in any way? Is there a breaking point as to when the cap rate would be higher?
I believe it would have gone because the size already, the size factor would have already given that breaking point to about 7.5. So I'd have to run the numbers again with a different age variant to see.
Okay, but there's not a breaking point for age per se. I know it's based on area, location,
Yeah.
and age.
What I'm saying here, the driving factor would most likely be the size. You get that bump in cap because of the size. Even if the age wasn't warranted, bump in cap would come.
And I know what your page 3 is, the intent of that, and you covered that, but the actual, it says as of April 1, 2018, you've got all these rents. Do we know when these leases were signed and for how long, or any of the current rents? You know?
Well,
Are they gonna-
they're all current as far as.
Okay, current as far as close to the reference date.
Everything on April 1st, 2018 is what the mailers indicated for the year from 17, to the end of December 17. So those are the current rents that were in place that we're allowed to examine. Anything past that would be post-reference, we're not looking.
No, I understand that, but.
So this is
But
an-
were some of them 10-year leases?
Oh, no, Shark Club, I believe that was a 30-year lease. Brown Social House was quite a long as well. These are substantial leases. These aren't covenant rent, or covenants of like 1 or 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
The only one that, that disappeared, as you see from the analysis, was, just on the edge of the shed district was the Pint Public House. I believe that building was sold, and as soon as it was, the transaction occurred, the Pint is no longer there, but it wasn't based on the fact that they couldn't generate a profit. It was mainly real estate transaction, and then once they were gone, the local came in the same year.
Okay. And the model, I guess, is chosen to value the entire structure as a restaurant. You're showing theaters here as well, just to show.
Yeah, I've actually looked at it like, this isn't a missing board yet. I'm sure this is gonna go either way, either party can file an appeal. I've been looking at it in a couple different ways, where there's 2 separate income streams, one being a live event and then the rest for the restaurant, or do we do encompass it on the same way? Every time I run the numbers currently, it kind of balances out a little bit to where the rent was all right for my take on market at $19 rate. If I were to be breaking it out, that restaurant rents, those restaurant rents would climb, and then maybe the live event center might drop a little bit. Then I'd also have to look at the storage area that's underneath as well, which isn't in inclusion of everything. So when I'm looking at everything from this appeals perspective and the information that I have leading back to the other number of years, I'm fine with the value that it is now. And that's what I'm stating. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newman.
It is a unique building. It closed in 1988. I remember as a child, I would go to this theater. I remember somehow we discovered in the balcony lobby that there was an advertising board that had posters for the next movie that was to come, and we discovered there was a door behind it, that you could swing it open and it led upstairs to the projection room. As kids, we discovered that. That was the best thing we ever found out about the place, of course. It closed in 1988, and it sat vacant for 25 years. Center Venture owned it. Their mandate is to try and take properties like this and do something with them, and they sold it for $100,000 to Canad. Why did Canad buy this? In part because Leo Ledahowski wanted to leave a legacy for the city, and in part because I believe he thought he could make a buck. Well, he was right on part of it. He will leave a legacy. He's not making a buck, and I'll show you that shortly. So, it's got a historic designation, and I'm going to flip you through my tabs as we speak. If you go to tab 2, tab 2 is the material in part from the city website. It includes the historical buildings bylaw starting at page 3. On to page 5 in the lower right hand corner, it describes what the grade designation means. And this property is designated such that the auditorium, if you go to page 7 in the lower right hand corner, the handwritten page 7, there's the designation on the Metropolitan Theater on Donald Street, total auditorium space, the entrance lobby, and the mezzanine level. Those cannot be changed. What that means in part is there will never be an ability to convert this property to a different use. I don't know that there ever would anyways. Page 9 is the caveat registered by the city of Winnipeg giving notice that this property is designated. And all of this is to simply make it clear, and this will not be in dispute, that this property has a historic designation. If you go to page 8, you'll find that the Playhouse Theater on Market Street has a historic designation for the foyer, and the concert hall accepting the ceiling. And on page 9, you'll find that the Walker Theater at 364 Smith Street also has a historic designation. They are the two most similar properties.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We're losing the page.
Pages.
Page
Page
number.
8 and 9.
They're numbered in the lower right-hand corner.
Right.
Right, but our page 9 is something different
Yeah.
compared to page 8 and
Our
9.
pages are restarting again.
Page 8, we have a certificate of registration.
Yeah.
Page 9, we have historic property. notice.
Okay,
That's
I
the-
see what's happened, my apologies. Go right to the back, go right to the very last page, just
Of the
before
tab?
tab 3, of the tab.
Tab 2,
Tab 2?
Very
I
last
see.
page.
right?
2 page 8s and 2 page 9.
Okay,
Um,
my apologies, I see what's happened. So,
Okay.
there's page 9, which designates the Walker Theater. And if you turn back one page to page 8, you'll see the Playhouse Theater on Market, 180 Market, and the elements there that are protected by the Heritage Conservation designation. My point simply is, and I'm not disputing this in any way, there's without question more work has been done in this facility than has been done in the Walker Theater, than has been done in the Playhouse, without question. And they have attempted to repurpose its use. Both Playhouse and Walker Theater, of course, can host live events, they can host performances, they can do much of what can be done in the subject property. What they cannot do is host banquets, because they don't have the kitchen facilities and that infrastructure that the subject property does. But, you know, could you have a caterer set up back of the house? Potentially. But they, without question, they don't have what's been done in the subject property. So, Mr. Lenahowski decides to buy this property. He puts a lot of money into it, no question. And I think the assessor would say to you, there's $15 million of permits in here. They've spent a lot of money in this place. It's gotta be worth a lot of money. About that, I would say, look at my tab 7. This is the story of the Sky Dome in Toronto, into which they put a lot of money. And you can see I've circled down towards the bottom, $600 million. That was the original cost to build the place. And then in 1993, it got sold for $150 million. And then it was sold again for $80 million in 1999. And then it was sold for $25 million when Rogers bought it for about 4% of its cost. Sometimes things cost a lot of money, sometimes they retain their value, sometimes they go up in value, but not always. And properties that are unique in their nature and fundamentally have a single purpose are the properties that are most likely to suffer from depreciation and obsolescence. But I tell you this simply to give you an example of what can happen. And actually, if you go 3 pages on, you come to the CBC article about the Heckle Island Resort, which too has been in receivership and has sold for pennies on the dollar. Both simply to illustrate the point, yes, they may have spent $15 million, and indeed, the assessor used the phrase, it was renovated to a replica state. That's true, because it was renovated to a replica state. Nobody would build a building like this today. Nobody would build 40,000 square feet. Think about who is the competition for this facility? A convention center, the big hotels, some big banquet centers. That's the competition for this facility. Nobody would build 40,000 square feet today. So I'll suggest to you that there's a lot of obsolescence associated with this property. If we look at tab 4, this is a photo taken from the stage looking out into the auditorium, and then it's followed by mapping of the various areas with the square footage of the various areas. And as the assessor has appropriately noted, when you go up into what they call the terraces, which is the balcony, some of the areas do have an obstructed view,
Sorry again,
Sorry.
we
We're talking
haven't got that
tab
under
one.
tab 4.
Tab 4 is the, is it
It's
assessor's
the
brief?
Assessors brief.
Tab 3, sorry.
Okay.
I'd like to say I'm just testing to see if you're alert, but I'm
We
not.
are.
I'm not. My apologies, tab 3, so you can see the mapping of the various areas. And as I was saying, as the assessor had noted, some of the terraces, which are the balconies, they do have obstructed views. But this is where you get the 40,000 square feet total area. In fact, these areas here only come out to about 20,000 square feet that is reflected on this map. Tab 4, just briefly, this was the 2018 assessment for the Walker Theater, and I show you this only to establish that it's done on a cost approach, as the assessor has acknowledged. Tab 4A is the 2020 assessment for the Walker Theater at $1,794,000 with a school tax exemption. So, the other thing I want to give you, and I filed this as part of what the assessor got, but it's not in your brief, but I'm going to hand it out, but the assessor has had it since November 4, and that is the historic financial information for the operation of the business. And this leads us to the highest and best use argument.
1 second, please. You have had this, Mr. Paul?
Yes, I received it in an email, indicating that the appellant may or may not rely on it.
Okay, thank you.
So what you have got in all the following pages, all numbered in the lower right-hand corner, are the financial statements for the operation of this corporation, which operates this business from day 1 through to May 31 of 2017. What you've got on the summary page is their revenues and expenses for all of these years. And if we can just look at the 2017 column, for example, we see that the total sales were $2,528,000, down 100 from 16, down 250 from approximately from 2015. We see that their departmental income, so in other words, cost of goods would be taken out, is $911,000. We see that their operating expenses were $1,347,000. That creates a loss of $436,000, but the place pays no rent. So what we did is we added $18.50 a square foot, which is $752,000 of rent. And if we now add $752,000 of rent to the operating performance, we have a loss of $1,188,000. The assessor says that if he assigned the rent, it would be $25 approximately a square foot, $1 million of rent. The business can't make any money not paying any rent. He would assign $1 million of rent. The model assigned for the 20 cycle, $19.12. The model assigned $18.50 for the 2017 tax year. The place doesn't make money. The place has not made money since day 1. And what you've got attached to this document are the financial statements, which reflect what is in the summary sheet, everything that has gone on in this property since it opened. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this because one of the most fundamental principles of appraisal theory is the concept of highest and best use. The very first thing an appraiser must always do is apply a highest and best use analysis. And frequently, most frequently, it is a very simple analysis. The existing use is the highest and best use. It's a short discussion, and that's it. But it's not always. And if you go to my tab B, which precedes tab 1,
Tab what?
B. So what you've got there is a chapter from the Appraisal of Real Estate, 3rd edition, on highest and best use. Highest and best use is fundamental to appraisal methodology. It is the very first step that an appraiser should undertake. And you can see on the very first page, the fundamentals of highest and best uses. The heading, highest and best use, may be defined as the reasonable, probable, and legal use of vacant land or an improved property that is physically possible, appropriately supported, and financially feasible, and that results in the highest value. That is something that should be done on every single property. And I think the assessor's answer to this very simply will be, look around the area, look at all the other bars and restaurants that operate. Nothing is dark, or nothing is dark for very long, let's say it that way. There's demand there, there's huge spin-off from the MTS Center. It's a gold mine, it can pay the rent. Simplistically, in my words, not the assessor's, I think that's the assessor's view on this. And not surprisingly, Mr. Poole and I have talked about this before, so we understand each other's perspectives on this matter. But it's not that simple. So, who is the tenant who will be able to afford to pay $772,000 of rent at $19.12 a square foot, or $1 million of rent at $25 a square foot? Who is the tenant who can afford to pay that? And in what is essentially a food operation, still make a buck? Because food operations are notoriously fickle. They're tough margins, they're low margins. Who can make a buck on this business and pay that kind of rent? Because if the answer is there is no evidence that anybody can do that, then this use is not financially feasible. And if it's not financially feasible, then this property cannot be valued in its present use. And what should then happen is an appraiser should say, I'm going to demolish, I'm going to treat it vacant, and now what is its value if you put a different improvement on this site? But the problem is, we can't do that. We can't put a different improvement on this site. So that makes this a very interesting appraisal problem. And it's one where, and I understand what the assessor has done. You know, if you go back to when the assessment was first put on, they actually looked for office building comparables at that point, had a 9% cap rate, because that was the cap rate of the day. What's happened over the years is the rents have gone up from $10.85 for the 2013 cycle to $19.12 for the 2020 cycle. Why have they gone up? Because rents generally in the surrounding area for much smaller premises have gone up. I get what has happened. What has happened to cap rates? They've come down. Why have they come down? Because cap rates have generally come down. Is there any evidence that says a cap rate on a building like this has come down? Has a building like this ever sold? Well, yes, sort of. The Walker Theater sold. True North bought it. So, going back to 1990, Perspective 3 Entertainment, as it was then called, Messrs. Cates, Rathbone, and a young guy named Kevin Donnelly, who worked for them then, I know this because I did work for them back then, they had an idea. Let's buy the Walker Theater. We'll turn it into Branson North. We'll do country music. The Winnipeg Choral Society was also bidding on the building. Best thing that ever happened to the Winnipeg Choral Society, they lost. Cates and crew bought it, never worked for it. Eventually they created a nonprofit. They gave Burton Cummings naming rights. He was to do concerts, generate some money. That never worked either. True North eventually comes along, and if you go back to my tab 4, there is the brief. And if you go to page 2 of that brief, subject sale history, May 4, 2016 $246,000. That was the sworn value of the Walker Theatre when it was transferred from the Walker Theatre Performing Arts Group, Inc. to True North. On a cost basis, it's assessed in 2020 at $1,794,000, but that was the sworn value. So, one property similar to this has transacted. There's actually another one, Pantages, post-reference, in the sense that, but the city has put it up for sale. In theory, there's a buyer. Things have gone very silent with that buyer. Who knows what's going on there? So we come back to the concept that if it's not financially feasible, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to look at other uses. You're supposed to find something else that will meet the tests. And if you go back to my tab B as in Bob, the appraisal of real estate excerpts, if you go to page 12.8 at the top left, the numbers are either top left or top right, but 12.8, the first full paragraph, if the physically possible and legally permissible uses, so it's physically possible for them to do what they're doing and it's legally permissible, are income producing, the analysis of financial feasibility will often focus on which potential uses are likely to produce an income or return equal to or greater than the amount needed to satisfy operating expenses, financial obligations, and capital amortization of the investment. So that we are crystal clear, there is no debt service in those financial statements I've shown you. That's not part of this. There's no rent either because it's owner occupied, but I put a rent in just so you'll be able to see. So this test cannot be met on this property. It doesn't work. And so what that leads us to ultimately is, how do we value this property? And I understand what Mr. Pohl has done here, and I have had the privilege of appearing opposite Mr. Pohl for many years, and I know him to be diligent and enthusiastic and comprehensive, and I mean that sincerely, in terms of the work he does. But I also say, with respect, he's got his blinders on this property.
You used a different B word last night, but
That's okay. Because
I've heard this before.
because it doesn't work. And so what does that mean? So you've got this uniquely sized property that's unlike any other comparable hospitality type facility. It's got a historic designation that prevents any changes from being made. The thing doesn't work economically. It's not financially feasible. You've got Pantages and Walker that are done on a cost approach. Why isn't this property done on a cost approach? I don't know the answer to that. And these comparables are all wonderful, and they're accurate, I imagine. I haven't checked, frankly, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they're throwing up rents in the $23, $24, $25 range. The assessor's backing it down because the model is to $19.12. Great. It doesn't work. It won't work at $10. It won't work at $15. It won't work at $20. So what are we going to do with this property? And then there's one more thing I want to tell you, and then I will show you, and then I will come to my conclusion. Tab 11. Tab 11, first page is the capitalization rate chart. Forget that for the moment. Turn the page, tab 1. What I'm showing you here are some hotel assessments. Why am I showing you hotel assessments? Because hotel assessments are actually the only property that I'm aware of where the actual revenue and expenses of an operating business are used to derive value. Why? Because you can't find rents for hotels in the marketplace. Hotels don't rent in Winnipeg. They're owner occupied. Maybe in New York City you can find rents for hotels, but not in Winnipeg. And so the methodology that has been developed is to actually use the operating expenses and revenues of the business It brings you to a net operating income, the capitalization rate is applied, the non-assessable chattels are removed, and you get a value. Why am I showing you this? Because, think about it, the Radisson, very nearby, on the corner of Smith and Portage. It's got banquet facilities, it's got a restaurant, it's got a bar, it's got rooms, but let's ignore the rooms, because the subject doesn't have rooms, obviously, but the subject has got everything else that the Radisson does. The Radisson gets a cap rate of 8.5, and this is the 2016 workup, sorry, the 2018 workup. I can tell you the cap rate was 8.5 for 2020 as well. That's how hotels are done. The 7.5 cap rate that's being used, and questions were asked about whether there's a break point. My belief is it's all about the size, and that's what happens with restaurants. The progression of capitalization rates in restaurants is a function of the size. The smaller they are, the lower the capitalization rate will be. The bigger they get, the higher the capitalization rate goes, theoretically to reflect risk. There's no transaction where anybody's renting or buying a 40,000 square foot restaurant. That's the problem. So, where does all of that lead me? It leads me to say to you that Leo Ledachowski, almost 10 years ago, made a decision. He made two decisions. One, he was going to create something in which in his mind would be his legacy. And secondly, he was going to hope that he could make some money. He was right on one of them, as I said earlier. He's created a legacy. He's done a wonderful job. The city has this wonderful building. And yes, theoretically, they try and put every kind of event they can put into the place to bring people in. I'm told by people that actually the presence of the MTS Center is a detriment. Because parking becomes very difficult in the area. On event nights, you'll get some people who are going to dinner before a game or a concert, for example, but you'll also get a lot of people who don't want to go anywhere near the place because of traffic. And parking is not easy in terms of the subject property. So, Mr. Ledachowski not only voted with his dollars when he decided to put money into this thing, but he has voted with his dollars every single year since this thing started. And if we exclude the rent, his losses between 2013 and 2017 totals $2.678 million. If you include the rent, it's $5.7 million of losses. In most cities, people would take a property like this and it would get an exemption of some kind because it doesn't work economically. This is an asset to the city of Winnipeg. It's a legacy asset, and here we find myself coming here every 2 years with Mr. Pohl to have this conversation about what should be and shouldn't be in relation to this property. I'm telling you, there's two things you could do with this property. You could, in theory, treat it as land value. By coincidence, I did a parking lot recently on the corner of Ellis and Donald, pretty nearby, the southwest corner of Ellis and Donald. $106 a square foot. If you apply $106 a square foot to this land value, you'd have $2,081,000. Of course, you can't get to land value without demolishing the building, so you would take that off in the normal course. But here you can't even take it off because you can't demolish. At the end of the day, I'm asking you to fix the value at a nominal $1,000. I'm telling you that is because of the very unique nature of this property. I know that will be counterintuitive to you, but at the end of the day, I say to you simply, who is buying this property for $9,730,000, and when they buy it, what are they going to do with it? How are they going to make a buck? And what tenant will ever be able to pay $1 million of rent in this facility? Subject to questions, that's my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Pohl, questions for the applicant?
Yeah, all right. I had a lot of time to think about this over the weekend and leading up to this. Obviously, we put some work into this, more so than usual. Getting back to the original concept of purchase, Center Venture sold this to Leo and Allison, right?
To a Canad corporation,
Canad
but
corporation.
but ultimately, behind it is Leo
About
Livingstone.
$100,000, right?
Yes.
At that point, it was supposed to be developed into a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that was being released to the public. It was gonna be along those lines. Then the Jets came back. Right? And that was scrapped for sports and entertainment and hospitality.
I don't know that there's a connection between the two, which your question seems to imply.
So you're indicating that the MTS Center with the NHL back in town and around that time frame had no influence on what was going on and how this operates. And yet, at that exact moment in time, there was a path for the event and it changed.
I can only say to you that, I don't know that the connection you're suggesting exists. But certainly in the early years,
Manitoba Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is what is tentatively kind of,
there was discussion about a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes, there was.
so. They didn't change it because the Moose was there. They changed it for what reason? Why did it change from, you're the owner, sitting in the owner's shoes today? Can you tell me the reason for the
I
change?
think you're asking for speculation on the.
Well, effectively, he's the agent for the owner. The agent is in his shoes today. The owner should be able to
So
tell us.
do you definitively know, Mr. Nolan?
I don't definitively know. I do acknowledge that early on, there was discussion about a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Okay, all right. So, it wasn't in your brief, but it is in mine. Get me back to the right page. On page 60 of my brief,
Yes?
article, the old Met Theater making a comeback. Highlighted, top, thanks to $16 million renovation. And then about halfway down the page, Center Venture sold the Met to the Canadians for $100,000 in 2006, and later helped secure a combined $3 million worth of grants from the city and the province. The caveat was that it had to be completed by 2013, but on top of that, you look at operating use of the property on my page 77, community use program. As part of the restoration and reopening of the Metropolitan, Canadians has agreed to permit schools and community groups to hold events at the MTS, or at the Met Center. So there's a number of days, 12 days a year. That would be part of the government grants, would that not? Could the government grants not be looked at as a prepayment in rent? And if that would be the case, that these days per year had to be there, there would have to be some business plan to convince the government to give that type of funding.
I agree.
So when you're saying it doesn't turn a profit or it's not turning a profit, what the business plan in effect would have to show that it could turn a profit, so that the doors would be open, so that they wouldn't pay $3 million and then the doors would go, or it would close in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years down the road. So there must have been a substantial business proposal to get $3 million from the province.
I expect there was, but the numbers, as I said to you, he made two decisions back in the beginning. One has worked out, one hasn't.
Okay. So, next thing, I guess was really, when I'm looking at your, I wasn't sure if you're gonna present it today or not, you kind of left it open-ended. The parent company for the Met, Canadians Met, is Canada Corp from Manitoba Limited, right?
Yes?
Are these financially audited statements that we're receiving?
These are the statements of the operating subsidiary
But
that operates the Metropolitan Entertainment Center.
but they're not audited statements.
Well, no, I don't believe these statements are audited.
So, to my point next, getting to whether they can turn a profit here or not, typically real estate is determined on, as you said, how much property would rent for. And incumbent in that is how well a business can do at a particular location. That's why you have national chains paying more for a particular location, because they can generate more at that particular location. In this case here, we see a number of businesses surrounding the MTS Center, or surrounding the MTS Center, which is, one is the Met Center, and Canada Inn's on the opposite side. They have been there long-term. They have not been dark one day since they started their lease, since the building was renovated. Would that enterprise there not be indicative of what could be generated on the restaurant areas in the Met Center?
So I'm going to answer your question as best I can. You've met Daniel Lucier, who is CEO of Canad. He and I went to lunch there one day as part of doing the tour for you. We were the only two people in the Allen restaurant that day. So theoretically, sure. But having said that, again, you're looking at 2,300 square feet or thereabouts, which is the Allen restaurant, and you're saying, can't that make a go of it? And the answer is, maybe it can long-term, but we've got another 38,000 square feet, the great majority of which, of course, is in the auditorium. And the auditorium, sometimes I am told by people that if your event is 100 people, for example, you're not going into the Met. Why? Because it's way too big. It's cavernous. You put 100 people into that big auditorium, people are lost. They get lost in the space. So they have a certain market. I'm not suggesting they don't do as much business as they can, but the bottom line is all these other places around are much smaller in their size, or in the case of the Shark Club, it's got the gambling element, it's got the machines, the poker tables, etc., that bring people in. That's what allows those places to succeed. This place doesn't work, as you can see.
Following up, we disagree on that point, but I'll follow up with a couple other issues. You mentioned it's a heritage building, it can't be changed or use can't be demolished, and I agree with that. Not that I think there would ever be a need to change it, but Canadians did purchase the Somerset building from the state, right?
Yes.
Center Venture has a plan for that building, as you can see in my brief, before the Somerset building was purchased. You can see the main floor being renovated to a sports entertainment hospitality type venue. It's clearly not a Dollar Tree, correct?
Time will tell what it will be.
Getting back to the highest and best use for this particular location, do you believe that a Dollar Tree store, given that Canada owns the entire property now, to be its highest and best use?
You're talking about the Somerset building
Yes.
now. I've not done any analysis. At the end of the day, that main floor Dollar Tree space is relatively large. It's the footprint of the building
Yep.
substantially. So, is there space for another bar/restaurant right opposite the MTS Center? Maybe there is. And maybe at 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 square feet, it'll work like a lot of the other ones in the area do. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Met.
You were involved in the purchase of that property, correct?
I was not.
You were not? Did you not fill out the INEs for that property?
That's a different question.
So you yourself don't have any knowledge of the due diligence that went into purchasing that
I
property?
do not. Our office was not involved in that matter.
Okay. Would it be safe to say that a purchaser of that property, given that Center Venture had clearly a plan for that space, may include a walkway from the Somerset building into the Met Center?
That's speculative, everything's a possibility.
Namely
But you may know as well that the city is now attempting to designate the Somerset building as a heritage building, which the end result of which will be that changes will not be allowed to its exterior.
Even though Center Venture has clearly had a renovation on the main floor.
I'm just telling you what,
And it's
and it's going to a
plans.
hearing on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. The city wants to designate that building, its exterior, as heritage protected.
Yeah, and as you can see through the Center Venture, the upper portions are left as is, and the main floor is completely renovated, from what you can see. And a walkway could easily go between the Allen Theater and that little storage room area.
And what would be the end result of that, Mr.?
Higher foot traffic to get through. When Canada purchased that property, $11 million investment, have to have its due diligence to see what they can be done, especially when Center Venture basically has an outline for
Sure.
it.
So people can now, if you're correct, people can now walk across a walkway and get into the Met building. And so what?
So you don't think that's...
Where's $1 million of bottom line to cover the rent?
So my point is that you represent Canadians. did Can-Am Inc. buy that building to be physically separate, or was there a game plan, a strategic development plan
There's no
for
game
that,
plan that I'm aware of.
that you're aware of? All right, getting back to a couple other questions. In my brief, I ran an analysis for, as you can see, you see the dates for all the advertising for a number of years leading up to the last reference cycle, I think,
Yep.
first 2016. I did not do it, I did not have enough time to do it for this cycle. Can you please tell us how many events were actually booked? Whether it be during work hours, business conferences, things of that nature, after-hour events, weekend events? Do you know?
The answer, I don't know is the answer.
Is
But
that
I'm
what-
sure as many as they can.
So would any of that income show up in your statement? Besides from just the beverage sales, with the actual rental of the actual place?
Every nickel of revenue that that place generates shows up in the statement.
All right. Getting back to the concept of how much rent could be charged. In any given location, if a business goes dark, would you then be saying that in that location, we shouldn't be using any valuation methods as far as income, if it was on income in that particular location? Or should you be taking the marketplace and saying, okay, this business proprietor didn't work, that's fine, another one can move in?
But my general answer to you would be that if a business fails in a given location, assuming the premises are amenable to alternate uses or the same use but a different operator, a different tenant, in those cases, I would say to you generally, continue to use the approach of assigning a rent and putting a value on the property. This is a unique property, and I just don't think it works like that. There's no market for 40,000 square foot premises like this in the marketplace.
Getting back to, you made some commentary on, I don't know, it was page 4.
Page 4 or tab?
Oh, sorry, tab 4,
Yeah.
True North's purchase of the old Walker Theater, or Cummings Theater, whatever you call it. You seem to have some knowledge of the history of the property. There was a newspaper article indicating that this property was sold and needed substantial work, millions of dollars of work. The current owner couldn't afford it. It was basically on life support. True North came in, they came in and they occupied it because basically it's too busy at the NTS Center. They needed a second venue. So when they took over this property, they inherited all the costs and are gonna upgrade the property and maintain the property. And the current ownership group is allowed to operate out of it, I guess, on other event nights. So they still have an interest in the property.
No, the current ownership, the previous ownership group, the Walker Theater Performing Arts Group, Inc., is out. This is True North's facility to do with as they wish, when they wish.
So there's no other interest in this property.
No other interest.
Can you look down the page and you see that the effective year built is 1906?
Yes,
Effective age is 1919.
I see that.
Would you consider this property to be a state-of-the-art facility?
So, there's no question, it has not had the renovation to the extent the Metropolitan has, but I will say to you, when the building was first bought, a significant sum of money was spent doing restoration to the ceiling. But it is, clearly the effective age is different. Whether effective age is 1919, whether that's appropriate or not is a different discussion. But again, I don't question the fact that the subject property has had much more money put into it than has this comparable.
So in terms of your comparison between the Met Center being state-of-the-art turnkey and the Walker, that's kind of like comparing, I don't know, 360 Main or 360 Portage to an OFD that's had relatively no work done to it.
But I think the point of bringing this forward was two things. One, to show what it's sold for in the market. But two, and even more importantly, this is valued on a cost approach, recognizing the unique nature of the property.
I really don't have any questions regarding an income approach. You didn't present one. I have no questions. Cost approach, you didn't present one. You didn't present a direct sales comparison approach. So there really is no rebuttal I can actually provide, other than you're asking for $1,000 based on a non-audited financial statement.
Is that a question?
I'm just clarifying, that's your position, based on a highest and best use argument.
Yes.
One failure in your eyes of the test of a highest and best use, when several business ventures are all around the MTS Center, including Canadians on the opposite side, and then Canadians also purchase of the Somerset building with an impending, looks to be, although you don't have any knowledge of it yourself, renovation of the main floor and a possible walkway to the Met Center.
Somerset building is irrelevant. The other properties you talk about all are substantially different size, they're different nature of property, but ultimately, yes, I've suggested that if we could get to land value, if we could demolish, that would be the appropriate approach. We can't get there though.
Okay. Last question, I guess, kind of following up on that. Is Canadians being typically a hotel venture in the marketplace for buying office buildings, older office buildings downtown? Did they do any other investigating on any other office building? Are they interested in purchasing anything else?
I have no idea.
Fair enough, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Bufacci?
I may be misunderstanding. However, there seems to be an implication that these financial statements either include some costs that are outside of the operation. So for example, do they include any offset for the amount of cash that was put into the building in the first place? You
No.
said there was no date?
None.
No.
So and maybe what I should do is walk you through 2 pages, just so it's crystal clear.
Okay.
If we go to pages, the very last 2 pages, very last 3 pages.
Starting page 13.
Actually, let's start at page 11. So what you see here on page 11 is the 2017 statement with the comparative 2016 in the right-hand column. So you've got 2 years.
Correct.
And it tells you the revenues generated, separated between what's called the restaurant, the theater, miscellaneous, and what's called Canad cash counters, which is an ATM machine.
Right.
It tells you what the cost of sales were for each of those departments. It tells you what the gross profit was, which is simply the 689,000 subtracted from the 2,528,000 above.
Right.
It tells you what the departmental operating expenses were. It tells you what the departmental incomes were. It gets you down to $911,000 at the bottom. If you turn the page, you'll then see that $911,000 number carried forward, and then you'll see what is called joint operating expenses of $1,347,000, which creates the loss of $436,000.
Correct.
Now I'm going to show you what's in that $1,347,000, because that's what follows on the following
Joint
pages.
operating expenses, correct.
So it's page 13 in the lower right-hand corner. So these are their administrative expenses, which include wages of $378,000. This is their software support and licensing for their IT services. These are all of their marketing costs, which total $143,000. Marketing continues on to the next page, and in the end it totals $147,000. For accounting, just so we're clear what that is, there's no accounting staff on site.
Correct.
What they do is they essentially buy their services from the Canad head office, and that's the allocation of that fee for all of the accounting services, which would be accounts receivable, accounts payable, and doing the books. Then the other items, bad debts, credit card expenses, office supplies, recruitment and training, workers' compensation. Over onto the next page, the utilities, the maintenance, the janitorial, the security, the insurance, the licenses, the taxes, and taxes, of course, are the property taxes, and that's what makes up the $1,347,000. As I said earlier, no debt service, no rent.
So outside of the accounting, which is a shared service with the rest of the CanAd operations, all of these expenses are specific to this property?
Yeah, there are a couple of other shared service items, so there is some marketing as well, where they'll take the benefit of head office in terms of some graphic work and some design work, where they've got a group at head office. There's a little bit of security as well for $7,200. So what CanAd has done, and they do this for all their hotels, they do this for all their properties, they have a group of people at head office with significant expertise,
Right.
and they
Right.
believe it's more cost efficient to
Yeah.
do it that way.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions, thank you.
Just to follow that up, Mr. Newman, page 11, cost of sales,
Yes.
what would that include?
Cost of sales is, so let's imagine you've got a restaurant. So you're serving food, you're serving drink. The cost of sales is the cost of buying the food and the drink. So let me just work you through that section of the document. So obviously on page 11, the sales are the revenues. Cost of sales is the actual amounts paid by the hotel, by the facility, to buy from the third-party suppliers the food, the drink, the napkins, all of that stuff. That's cost of goods. That creates the gross profit. Then the operating expenses are substantially the wages and benefits, and that gets you to the departmental income.
And I don't see any revenue for VLTs, is that
No.
something that was never
There's
considered?
no VLTs there.
Never considered?
No.
I guess the whole concept of highest and best use, you said the land value would be plus or minus $2 million
Yeah.
based on a parking lot sale,
Right.
and the cost of demolition.
Not a
which you-
parking lot sale, but
A land sale that's used as a.
Exactly.
Okay, and then demolition cost, if you could demo it, like, we don't know what that demolition cost is because it's a moot point, you can't demolish
Can't
it.
do it, right.
So you're saying there's a nominal value. Are there other properties that you're aware of that have nominal values because of their historical designation?
I can't think of a property that has a nominal value because of the historic designation. You heard me on Pantages and Walker Theater and how they're done on the cost approach. I am aware of a contaminated property which has a nominal value because of the contamination. And the argument made in that case was essentially, the city said the land values, let's call it $1.1 million, round numbers. We said, here's the engineering reports that say it'll be $1.5 million to remediate the property, and the value is set at $37,000. Whoever buys this is buying an encumbrance in the form of the historic designation because it restricts their freedom to do what they want with the property. And they're buying a liability in the sense of, even if you closed the doors and left it dark, if you could, you're gonna have property taxes, which in the statement were $170,000. The city doesn't like shuttered buildings anymore. They come along under the derelict buildings bylaw, and they impose requirements on owners, and they'll go after you. So, as I said, Mr. Ledowski made his decisions many years ago. One of them has worked out. The building is a legacy, but it's now become a financial legacy for him as well, in the sense of the ongoing losses.
Okay, and I know you've come up with a nominal value based on the highest and best use theory,
Yeah.
but what is the highest and best use of this property? You didn't come to a conclusion there, did you?
Because, so what I would say to you is, and I think we're gonna see this, the Bank of Montreal is moving out of their buildings at the corner of Portage and Main. Heritage designated. What do you do with a building like that? The Millennium Center, the old CIBC bank premises on Main Street, just off Portage, banquet center. right? What do you do with a facility like that? They're not, even if you could change the interior, which you can't, what do you do with big, big rooms like that? What do you do with a big ballroom at the Fairmont? What does the Fort Garry do with their big ballrooms on the 7th floor? When they have events in there, they have events in there. The rest of the time, they sit dark, because they're not really amenable to another use. So, in the ideal world, somebody might well say, I can knock it down, I can put an office building there with a 19,000 square foot footprint, I can do something with it, but they can't. So, in the ideal world, what happens is nonprofit organizations come along, they acquire this property, they turn it into an archives building, they turn it into a museum. Governments tend to do what I call urban engineering, because they're prepared to fund buildings like this to perpetuate them by putting a government tenant in there who's prepared to pay rent and isn't worried about the bottom line per se. That's what you do with things like this. They're an asset to an urban society. I get that completely. I agree with that. But from the world of investors and buyers and sellers, who's going to buy this thing? What are you going to do with it? That's reality, I suggest.
Thank you. Mr. Pohl, desire for summation?
Yeah. In the shed district, there's subject properties in the shed district adjacent to the largest economic driver in the city. You see numerous properties being built completely new north of Portage, Brown Social House, or older space being redeveloped to capture the same economic spinoff being at Canada's building on the opposite side, as well as the Shark Club. You see Canadians purchasing the Somerset building. I believe that's the only office building downtown that they occupy. You see that the Somerset building on my page 53 has obviously been looked at by Center Venture as far as main floor redevelopment to encapsulate exactly what you see going on everywhere else around the MTS Center. I don't believe that Canadians would be purchasing the Somerset building standalone if they didn't have the Met Center. I believe that clearly there's some due diligence there that the appellant may not be aware of to incorporate their purchase with the Met Center. Having said that, what I really get a feel is this is a way to come down and say that you can't lease this, or you can't rent this property out, it can't turn a profit. Forget the fact that everything around the shed district is trying to capture the economic spin-off from the MTS Center. No other business enterprise could turn a profit here. So please give us $1,000 in assessment. Effectively, what I'm hearing is there is no exemption status for this property, but if you give us $1,000, it effectively is the same thing. I don't think that's appropriate. I think the marketplace has spoken in the shed district. Center Venture is a controlling aspect of that. The Met Center was redeveloped for this purpose. There is $3 million or so of grant money provided by the province. Although I'm not privileged to see any of that internal documentation in order to get the $3 million. You would think there'd be some strings attached with it. There'd have to be an appropriate business plan in place to ensure that this doesn't go dark in the near future or immediate future, to allow the 12 or so days a year that they're allowed access to for community events. I think if this were to go dark and Canadians wouldn't be in there, you'd have a lineup of business entrepreneurs trying to get in to generate their whatever their plans would be for this property. So I think a $9 million level of value, $9,730,000 is reasonable. And I'd also like to point out that the level of value was increased at the last 2018 board revision to the $8 million mark. And I think based on that same idea, its income value should be adopted here today and supported here today in lieu of an unaudited financial statement that I can't really make much of.
I thank you. Mr. Newman?
think Mr. Pohl is making way too much of the unaudited nature of the statement and his assertion that he can't make very much of it. It is crystal clear. CANAD statements are very good in terms of how they're laid out and the information they present. We always forget, or we often forget, the burden of proof is on the assessor. It's the assessor's obligation to prove highest and best use. It's the assessor's obligation to prove value. He says there would be a lineup. I'm sure there would be. But let him identify for us the lineup of tenants. It's his obligation to prove. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentations. The order will come out in due course, Mr. Newman. Thank you. We will take a short break. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. Next property we'll deal with is 1770 King Edward. I'll have you swear the appellant in, please.
Please state your full name.
Sid Story.
Do you swear and swear to present the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Thanks.
Morning, Mr. Story.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
You're representing the owners of 1770 King Edward.
Correct.
It's the amount of the assessed value that we're dealing with.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Pohl, we'll hear from you, please.
Okay, file number is 19-4268. Roll number is 0709189350. Civic address is 1770 King Edward Street. The roll year for 2020, the assessed value is $5,026,000. Of that, $4,049,000 is class code 60 taxable. 585,000 is class code 40 institutional property and is exempt from school taxes, and 392,000 is class code 40 institutional and is exempt. Property was built in 1964. There's a renovation put on it, addition put on. The effective year is 1990. The gross floor area is 36,415 square feet. Leasable area is 23,860 square feet. On the following page, we have a purchase price in 2008 prior to the work being done at $900,000, and in 2019, although it's post-reference.
Yeah, we won't refer to that, Mr. Pohl. Thank you.
I wasn't going to speak to the actual value, I wasn't asking for it, but the ownership change I'd have to speak to. Comparable rents are on, for OFS properties, are on page 324. We looked at approximately 65 comparables. Their average rental rate is $14.06, weighted average is $13.86, and median of $13.75. Those are for smaller CRUs spaces. We look about $5,000 or 5,000 square feet and less. Then we looked on page 5 for larger CRU spaces. And the average rental rate is $15.19, weighted average at $14.73, and median at $14.72. And again, those are north of 5,000 square feet for CRU spaces. And on page 6 is our land comparisons for the excess land. Our average is $11.93, weighted average is $9.90, and median is $9.67. So when we get through the actual analysis of the property, but before we get to that, I'll just show the property itself. Page 13. It's on the corner of Bannister and Route 90. Page 14 shows it on the opposite side. Page 15 shows the aerial photo of the property with the excess land at the back. And on page 16 is the IME that was attached to the property. And on page 18 is the last order revision for for 2018 cycle, indicating the confirmation of the property. We go back to the income stream, which is on page 7. For the two smaller CRUs at 29,000 or 2,900 square feet, we have approximately $14.90 a square foot and $16.19 a square foot on either one of them, for a total PGI of $90,841. Our standard parameters apply, 5.5% vacancy loss, gives an effective gross income of $85,845, expenses at 2%, shortfall at 7%, produces a net operating income of $81,876. Capped at 6.7% gives us our $1,222,000. On the following page, sorry, I should have spoke, that was for the 60T class space. For the 40S space, which is on the next page, on page 8, the CRU is a little bit bigger, 10,000 square feet. We have a $13.43 a square foot rental rate, which produces a PGI of $138,571. Again, the exact same standard parameters apply. 5.5% vacancy gives us a effective gross income of $130,950. Expenses at 2%, shortfall at $7, gives us a net operating income of $124,359, and capped at 6.7% gives us our $1,856,000. On the following page, the 40E space, again, two smaller CRUs underneath 5,000 square feet. We have rental rates of $14.67, $13.77, which produces a PGI of $109,156. Again, the exact same standard parameters. Vacancy at 5.5% gives us an effective gross income of $103,152. Expenses at 2% and shortfall at 7% gives us a net operating income of $98,126, capped at the same 6 and 7% capitalization rate. Gives us a capitalized value of $1,464,567. Our additional land value, which is approximately 56,000 square feet. Our square foot rate is $8.36. Gives us a value of $468,000. Added to that is a total of $1,933,000. So, a summation of all three income streams is on page 10. We have an average rental rate put on all three income streams of $14.19. That's highlighted to the left-hand column. With our standard parameters, I said, at 5% for vacancy gives us an effective gross income combined of $319,947. Same expenses at 2% and shortfall at $7 gives us a net operating income of approximately $304,000. Capped at 6.7% gives us our capitalized value of $4,552,716, with an adjustment for the excess land at $468,000, which yields $5,011,000 total. That being said, any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Story?
No questions. Mr. Chair, I'm just here on behalf of the owner to request a 50-foot.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Just to be clear, on the front, we've got $5,026,000.
There's a bit of a rounding error.
Okay.
I'm not gonna change it from that small.
Okay.
So it is $5,026,000, that is the assessed value?
Yeah, I should have spoke to it, or it's such a small difference in value. We've had a few issues with a bit of rounding, so. That's okay. You can answer.
No.
It
I have no
tends,
questions.
it tends to get magnified and bigger series, like the bigger towers, if you're out a little bit, it will show up a little bit.
I just clarification on page 1, you've got $4,049,000 that's taxable,
Right.
but on page 10, you've got the taxable amount is $1,222,000. Actually, all three income
All three
streams
are very
don't match.
different, yeah.
That's what it is.
Apologize, I didn't catch that. Exactly.
There's nothing in the analysis that gives us that.
Just give me 1 second. Can't be right. Can I ask, just take a bit of a break on this and go back to the office to confirm, because that can't be right. Would that be appropriate?
Well,
It seems like there's an area here I'd rather confirm before I move forward with it. And I apologize for not catching it.
can we not just
Like the income streams on,
verify that this is what's in the roll, the 5,026,000
Front page.
based on those?
that would be in the roll.
Can we confirm that? I'll just get the secretary to confirm that, because Mr. Story's not arguing.
I have a problem, we just want to protect the right
The
to.
original application is 5,026,000.
Right, but you don't have access to the supplement. What we wanna know is,
The
these are the
breakdowns?
breakdowns.
Yeah, what's taxable?
The taxable portion is 4,049,000. The school tax exempt is 585,000, and the full exempt is 392,000.
Okay, the same as what's showing on.
Page 1.
Okay.
Other than give me a chance to go back to the office and review it.
No, that's fine. If this is the amount that's in the roll, and Mr. Story is not having an issue with it, I just wanted to point that out, that
Yeah, no,
the three streams on,
Yeah,
I'm
no, I see.
certain, although probably I'm being speculative here, but it probably couldn't be done as stream 1, stream 2, stream 3.
Probably a
for
portion of
the
all
three.
of them.
A portion of all of them is probably because half the amounts are attributable, like they do total to that amount.
Yeah,
So as long as the appellant is not contesting that,
okay. Well, I'll talk to Mr. Story after.
thank you. Nothing further than Mr.
No,
Story?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our decision will come in due course.
Thanks to Mr. Bedford for being patient. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Call the hearing back to order. Morning, Mr. Bedker, thanks for your patience. You're representing the owners for 3 properties today?
Yes,
And is it the amount of assessed value we're dealing with only?
just the assessed value.
Thank you. I'll be sworn in, please.
Please state your full name.
Travis Becker.
And you swear as evidence about to present the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
We'll just deal with these in the order that they're listed on the docket. So the first property we'll deal with is 1055 Wilkes. When you're ready, Mr. Cesar.
1055 Wilkes, file number 193077. Roll number is 1206448110. Address is 1055 Wilkes. We had assessed value for 2020. 1,610,000 as class code 60 taxable, and 451,000 class code 60 institutional, school exempt, for a total of 5,661,000. I'm making a recommendation today. Class code 60T at 1,523,000, and class code 40S at 3,680,000, for a total of 5,203,000. And I believe that'll be accepted by the public.
Would you just give us the basis of your
A
recommendation,
reduction in,
please?
a reduction in land value. This is a cost property where we are agreeing on the revised cost approach and land value. I can go through
So
this.
the land value, it will still be the same
$10
square foot rate?
No, $10.25.
So the same area is being used?
Same area.
But a lower
Land
per
rate
square foot rate?
and a small adjustment to the cost approach. Depreciation. Yeah, depreciation. Essentially the exact same cost, or cost of reconstruction.
Once again, Mr. Becker, questions or concerns?
No, we agree.
Ms. McFadden,
No question.
Ms. Linklater,
No question, thank you.
and I have no questions. Thank you. Nothing further than Mr. Becker? That'll bring us to 194 Broadway.
File number 19-2015, roll number is 1209280800. Civic address is 194 Broadway, otherwise known as the Manitoba Club. The 2020 value was gonna be $3,089,000. I'm making a reduction to $2,768,000. And that's based on a reduction in land area, or land rate, for the land value to $95 a square foot, and a small adjustment to the cost approach for, depreciation. The major part of it is the land.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, questions or concerns?
No, we accept it.
Ms. McFadden?
No question.
Ms. Linklater?
No question, thank
No further presentation, Mr. Becker? Thank you. That'll bring us to 210 Masson.
File number is 193696, sorry, 193396. Roll number is 0606061010. Civic address is 210 Mason. Value for 2020 deal is $1,317,000. While looking at this property, go to page 8, which was an aerial view of the property. Page 9, this is a heritage site. It's been boarded up for a number of years. If you go to my page 2, it was purchased in 2010 for $720,000 with the intent to get funding for it, to turn it into a, I guess the charitable organization was a northern group which would fly down people who were sick so they'd be able to stay here. That project never got off the ground, and it was sold in June 2014 to the current owner for $1.2 million. The current owner is Towers Limited. If you look at my page, starting at my page, look at my page 10. There's been no permit work taken out on this property, besides from a boarding permit which closed it up in 2010. 2011 shows the write-up for what it was to be as far as a place for people who are sick to come in from northern communities. It did not work. On page 13, they sold the property. Portland store. This is what the former ownership group was. That project never worked. We'll investigate in this property because it kind of, it sold for 1.2 relatively quick, right? A property that didn't seem like it was going to property, I looked through what we had. The current ownership group applied for a rezoning and variance on this property, starting at page 14. And in May of 2019, that zoning was granted, the change in zoning was granted to residential multifamily large. This property on page 20 is on the historic, 21 is on the historic list of properties. Page 2 shows what grade it's at. Point 2 shows which grade it's at. And then the little highlighting is what needs to be maintained, points 1 through 3. All wood paneling on the ground floor, fireplace on the ground floor, wood stairwell between the ground and second floor. So when I did a bit of due diligence in investigating this property, there is a plan in place to redevelop it. Although there is no permits taken out, I don't have any access to that. Nothing's been registered that I can see on my end from PP&D. It is on one of the FT3 projects lists. So this is an architectural design firm. On page 23 shows 210 Mason redevelopment feasibility study. So turn to page 24. It's a small write-up on the actual property. It looks like it's going to be substantially renovated. I'm not sure how much of it will be torn down or how much of it will be kept. Couldn't tell. There's no real information other than what you see in front of you. On page 26, I did a search on the actual ownership group. So it's a real estate holding company. Obviously, as you can see on the shareholders, it's 210 TRGL and Vinell Holdings Partnership. The next page shows that its towers is incorporated with it, as well as the membership that you see associated with them. And on the following pages, it looks like it's a Jacobson project. They're out of Brandon, design construction company. So it looks like that this is going to be the path for the property, like it's going to be renovated into, not sure if it's apartments or condos or whatever it'll be. But given the fact that our cost approach on page 3 reflects basically a land value with no real value to the actual building itself, I don't think a cost approach necessarily would be warranted at this point, given that it was sold, pushing the reference date of 1.2 million, with all factors being considered. 1.2 million I think is reasonable. There's obviously a transition stage for this property, and without any more details, when it being passed by City Council for rezoning, and of course, what you see on the following pages with the development that's going to occur on the site, I think the actual purchase price of the property and all risk factors being inclusive of it, I think 1.2 million is reasonable.
So you think,
1.2 million is reasonable, so that's a recommendation on making it 1.2 million. So it was going to be done on the cost approach, like I said, and there was going to be a $139,000 value put towards the actual building itself. It's basically appreciated down to nothing, and the value of the property was going to be at about $30 a square foot for land. After review, looks like this property is being thought to be torn down, it's being thought to be renovated, with everything being considered. 1.2 approaching the reference date, given the fact that it's a 2017 sale. I think it's reasonable.
thank you. Mr. Petfer, questions?
No, we were unaware of the sale until I got Mr. Holmes' brief. When we first took it on, we were not aware that there was a sale taking 1.2. So at this point, we'll accept the 1.2.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, questions,
No
concerns?
questions.
Ms. Lindblad?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. With that, I will call the hearing to a close. The orders will be up in due course.
I will get